part 2. So, ladies and gentlemen, give a big round of applause to Niall McGuirk.
Just want to apologise. I'm not Paddy Smith. I'm not Mark Lanigan. I'm not anyone like that. So.
But the great thing about punk rock is the leveller. There is no stars. It's every. I thought that when I wrote the punk rock oral history book, it's actually the big people are important, but also the people, the foot soldiers, are equally important, and that's the beauty of punk rock, as surely you know now.
Of course I do, John.
So,
but the people here may not know. They might want something better. But,
get their money back. So you were actually originally from Dublin?
I'm from Dublin, yeah. Born in the north side of Dublin, yeah, and lived there all my life. Yeah.
So what was the kind of first music you were into? Did you start with punk rock? Because you're a bit younger than me, aren't you? So your starting point is going to be slightly later than mine, isn't it?
Yeah, so I was born in '68, so thankfully I don't have to listen to any of the music that came before punk rock. So I don't need to worry about all those bands. Yeah. So when you said earlier about people, you know, what you can't listen to, I never really came across them, and I'm there. Not to who, but it kind of rings a bell. But I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't even know their music. Well, sorry, I probably would, but I don't. I haven't gone and got their records. But so my introduction to music was just listening to my brother's record collection.
So what
they
kind
were
of
going in. So
kind of
76, 77. So I was only 8 or 9. And so they were bringing in, so, you know, obviously the Pistols and the Clash were coming in, Elvis Costello was coming in, Ian Jury, you know, stuff like that. And they were going into town every week and getting, you know, records and whatever, golden discs in Liffey Street as it would have been in Dublin, and coming home, and a whole world kind of opened up, you know. I think I probably did have a Shawaddy Waddy album, which was probably Red Star in 1975 maybe, so that might have been.
Did have a couple of kind of alright singles.
Yeah.
But then it all went a bit cabaret, didn't
But
it?
I remember bringing my Shawaddy Waddy album into Dolphin Discs and saying, "Oh, I've just got this, can I exchange it please?" But I had it for like a couple of years.
But after 2 years, that's a pretty good deal, isn't it?
Yeah, they let me, yeah. I think I got a Clash single or something in return. So.
Oh, you swapped an album for a single?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I guess on exchange rate, a whole Shawaddy Waddy album is worth one Clash single.
It was probably 75 pence in Dolphin Discs. Yeah.
So you're just like a little kid punk then, yeah? You know,
I don't know. Yeah,
that's what we used to think.
I still am.
Our massively elderly age of 16, that the 10-year-old punks were like little children.
Yeah. So, I was, I suppose, a little kid punk. You know, I just listened to my brother's record collection, and then when I was able to go into town on my own and swap my Shawaddy Waddy album, I could do that. But yeah, I didn't even think about it as being a punk. It was just, you know, this is good music. This is exciting, this is interesting, and it's worth listening to. So that's kind of where that came from. I never even thought about it as being a punk, you know.
So it just seemed like that's what music was.
That's what the interest in music was anyway. Yeah.
So do you have any idea there was a punk scene or something, or was it just like your brother, you went to town on your own and came back with a record?
Well, at that stage, yeah, sure. You know, I wasn't thinking about a punk scene. I wasn't reading about the punk scene. I wasn't, you know, I that was like, I was very young, you know, so I was, you know, maybe 10 years old or something. So I wasn't thinking about it as a punk scene. Then my brother started going into town and going to the Dandelion Market or whatever, which was in Stephen's Green, and you'd hear about that, about what, you know, who they'd seen or whatever, and then they started getting more into, like, there was a kind of a fashion around it, you know. So I remember my brother was sent away for a pair of bondage trousers, and you know, they came in the post, and like, this was all very exciting, you know, but I wouldn't wear them now, but he used to, you know, dress up, and this kind of seemed very exotic and extravagant, you know, but that was probably my first kind of like going, all right, is this what punks wear, you know? I remember, I think I had a pair of boot runners, and going outside my house and pulling up my jeans so they'd be on top of the boot runners, and my ma she called me back in and says, put those jeans down, and I think that's the closest I got to punk fashion, to be honest.
And punk rebellion. Did you roll your trousers back up again?
Yeah.
So what was the first kind of gigs you went to?
Paranoid Visions, I remember it well. it was in the Ivy Rooms in Dublin. So I was at my cousin's wedding with my two brothers. I suppose it was Peter probably might know this better, but it's probably 1983. I'm guessing. So we were at the wedding, and Gary, my brother, was going into this gig in town, and I just said, "Oh, can I come?" You know, and he goes, "Oh, if you have to." And so we got a bus in, left the wedding, got the bus in, saw Paranoid Visions, saw all the trouble, like fights. It seemed like my memory of it is just there was fights everywhere, there was beer flying everywhere, and it was just enthralling. Just it made. And it's kind of strange when you talk about it, because I wouldn't want my kids to be in that environment, but there was just something about it, something about the magic and the atmosphere, and underneath all that madness, there was some really nice people. You know, so not everybody was fighting, obviously. Even the ones who were fighting were probably very nice at the end of the night as well. You know, it was that kind of thing. So then we got the bus and went back to the wedding afterwards. Nobody missed us, so it was fine.
It's interesting that the first gig you go to is a local gig, because most people would start with a bigger band and then discover that, oh wow, there's actually local bands, but you actually did it the other way around.
Well, yeah, but that's just probably by accident, you know, because of that. Because at that stage, I think the Outcasts had done a few gigs in Dublin. My brothers had gone into that, so they'd come home and start talking about all that. And then at that stage, 83, then I was starting to buy, you know, sounds, getting the music press and finding out a bit more. I was starting to buy my own tapes or records at that, you know, then. And I suppose I didn't probably go to too many of the gigs in the Ivy Rooms, because I was too young. And that's when I did go to, like, say, the Clash in the SFX and the bigger gigs then, the Damned and Susie and the Banshees.
So you kind of saw all the bands, the bigger bands, that came through town.
Yeah, well, yeah, I suppose. I remember the Ramones, and yeah.
So was there a sense that Dublin had its own kind of version of the scene, or were you too young to even know? This just felt like this is what punk is. It must be like this everywhere.
Yeah, well, yeah, I suppose so. You know, we got a band together because, like, it was a bit like that, what you're saying about Blackpool earlier. You know, there was a few friends, and for Christmas one year I got a bass, Andy got a guitar, and we got this other fella who played drums in the Artane Boys band, and said, "You must know how to play drums." And we formed the band, but it just seemed to be that's what you do. It wasn't like, oh, that's what's happening here or that's what's happening there. Just go, this seems to be the right thing to do, you know. And I think we got a Clash songbook and started playing a few Clash songs.
Was that I think I remember that book. Was it the only book that had chords in it written out, that people actually learned guitar from that book, didn't they?
Well, that's how I probably still don't know how to play the bass, but I played bass in a band in a few different bands for about 7 or 8 years, but it all started from that Clash book, yeah.
So what kind of gigs were you playing? Just like youth clubs, like little bars or whatever, or?
Yeah, so we played a few school halls, and we played some Battle of the Bands in the Dublin Council Trades Unions that had a little hall in Dublin, and then it got to that was probably for about maybe 9 months, and then wanted to play a gig in a proper venue, which was a bar in Dublin, and the name has just gone from me for a second. I can't remember why. Tommy Dunn's Tavern, and because I think either Paranoid Visions or the Gorehounds had played Tommy Dunn's Tavern, you know, a month previous. We went, all right, this must be where you play gigs. So rang up Tommy Dunn's Tavern and said, we're in a band, we want to play, and that's how we got the first gig. But we were all underage, but I don't know, it was okay, whatever way it worked at the time. We were probably lucky, but it made me think a lot, because we started, like, we were playing gigs, but then I started putting on, you know, other gigs after that. But it made me think that, you know, music shouldn't belong to the over 18s, you know, and a lot of times in venues it's bars that, you know, music becomes the domain of, you know. So it's great for a place like this, so that people, you know, well, it's not really all ages here, but
it is all ages, but it's
potentially
just certain ages.
but potentially, you know, so because it was a barrier, you know, when we were playing, or maybe to go and see bands or whatever you think about. So I didn't really start going to the local gigs till I was kind of old enough, or looked old enough to get into a bar, you know. So.
When you were playing these gigs, did you get to know bands like the Paranoid Visions? Did you get to know there's kind of like, sort of, I guess it's like an early to mid '80s sort of upcoming Dublin punk scene, wasn't it? So were you kind of on the fringes of that, or did you know those people? Or
well, we got to know them very quickly, you know, because they were all very welcoming.
What kind of bands were they?
So well, it was especially Paranoid Visions, I suppose that probably was '84 then when I was playing. So I would have been 16, playing in a band. They were called Vicarious Living, from a line from a Flux of Pink Indians song. And just we played that gig in Tommy Dunn's Tavern, and I remember in coming up to it, we used to just rehearse in whatever in our houses, and then getting to talk to the likes of Peter from Paranoid Visions and Deco, and they were just so supportive and so helpful. Going, oh yeah, you should rehearse in Alan Furlong's Apple Studios. And you're going, what's that? You know, it's where bands rehearse.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a place where bands rehearse, you know, and so it was really centered around their assistance, to be honest. And when we played that gig, Deco, I remember, as well as anything, Deco comes in and he gets up on stage and sings a song, and we're going, yes, we've made it. Deco sang a song with us. We must reject the superpowers. Yeah. So,
what was it like meeting Deco the first time? He's quite an imposing character, isn't he?
Yeah, I think I was lucky because Deco liked my big brothers. He was very friendly. Now we can maybe, if we want to get to talking about putting on gigs, and there was a time when we were putting on gigs and Deco was kind of slagging what we were doing, but Deco used to think that we were kind of college punks or whatever, but I didn't go to college. I left school when I was 17, so well 16. But there was never any falling out, but it was just kind of that's Deco, Deco, you know, and because you would have known him, you know, from coming over as well, like, and so they were always really supportive, and you know, they'd give you gigs, and I wasn't even thinking about it it wasn't like a punk scene, you know. It was just, oh yeah, these are bands and they play this and we can all do things together, which is great.
So you were operating very much in the DIY, or DIT, do together kind of notion, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose, probably. So I was starting to buy records from bands like Flux of Pink Indians and Crass. So I started off listening to my brother's record collections, then got more into the kind of, you know, bands with strong messages who were bringing out their own records. And it just seemed to make sense that if you want to do something, or if you want something to happen, then you do it. And you try and make it happen. You don't wait for someone else. You don't complain about it not happening and wait for someone else. So it was so there was a nice kind of, I don't know, it was just like, yeah, we want it to happen. It was like, so how we met the first time, you know, was, well, why haven't the Membranes played in Dublin? And it was like, well, nobody has asked. So then Hugo, who was a friend of mine, wrote to you and said, you know, will you come over and play in Dublin? And you went, yeah. So so it was that kind of thing. If you want something to happen, just go and make it. Don't wait, because if you wait for someone else to do it for you, you'll go, I don't really like it being done that way.
So was that time we came over, was 86, was that the first sort of band from another country you put on, and it kind of started the process of you ending up with bands like Fugazi and things?
Yeah. So that started in 86, just from writing letters, and that kind of from the fanzine network, you know, or what a network, like walking around with a plastic bag trying to sell a fanzine, because I did a fanzine called Whose Life Is It Anyway, and then, you know, writing to yourself, and you came over, and then I think you came over probably a year or so later, and it was really after that second time when kind of you went back and you started saying to people you should go to Dublin. So like Anne Revan from Wales, I think, were the next band, and then it started picking up after that.
And quickly you found there was actually this kind of weird international scene of bands held together by fanzines, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Like everywhere, every country and every town had a band that could put a gig on and you could stay in their house.
Yeah. yeah.
In Irish Outpost, this kind of, what actually was by then an international punk underground, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And like, and like the postman, and it was always was a man, would come twice a day with letters, and you'd have the letters would arrive twice a day, and there'd be fanzines arrived, and you'd have you would I'd have written off to somebody and sent an envelope, with the stamp on it that was soaked, so that you could reuse it again. And twice a day you'd get this stuff in the letterbox, and it was just, a fanzine that you'd send whatever 50 pence away for, or a postal, an international money order, which you'd have to go to the post office and get them. But it was like just hearing about, and that's how we got to hear about bands from all over, other countries, and the fanzine scene was hugely important.
I just want to explain when Niall said about the stamp having soap on it. Is you cover it with soap, and the person at the end could chip the soap off with a fingernail, put the stamp on, because he took the stamp that, when they put the ink stamp on top of the stamp to nullify it, you could actually unnullify it and use it again, couldn't you?
Yeah.
And they'd be used about 15, 20 times,
yeah.
wouldn't they?
Yeah. Reuse the stamp.
This is how cheap the whole scene was, actually, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Well, it's what kept us going, I suppose, because you'd be writing an awful lot of letters, and I used to have to, if I was writing to people in the UK, I'd say, "Can you send me back my stamp?" Because they were Irish stamps, they were no use to, and but it never really seemed like a strange request. You kind of go now and you're kind of laughing at it, but it didn't.
No, well, no one had any money. That was the thing, wasn't it? And, well, that thing about letter writing as well, you just mentioned. I remember even interviewing someone like Penny Rimbaud from Crass. He said on Thursday was their letter writing day, and all of Crass, everyone in the commune, had to sit there and answer. They got hundreds of letters, and they would answer every single letter.
Yeah.
So rock and roll was so un-rock and roll, wasn't it?
Yeah. And answered a letter to me for my fanzine, and there was an interview with them in my fanzine as well. It was probably about 9 months after I sent it, because they got so many letters.
A lot of Thursdays till they got round to that.
Yeah.
So the first time you brought us over, and the gigs are really well put on. I mean, you put a few local gigs on at that point, so you kind of worked out how to do gigs, or was there still like kind of holes and gaps in your knowledge?
Oh, there was certainly holes and gaps in the knowledge, and the only gigs that I put on, that's a strange term even to me, but the only gigs that I booked, say, were gigs that like my own band played, because I'd say, well, if someone else is in a band and they're from Dublin, well, it's just as easy for them to do it. So I wasn't like a gig promoter. I wasn't trying to put on gigs. So we played it, we put on a few of our own gigs, but we probably hadn't done more than 10, maybe. When you came over, we just pretended. So we got the Hot Press yearbook out. Like when you said you were going to come over and we needed to get a few gigs, we took out the Hot Press yearbook, and probably we went into a shop and looked through the Hot Press yearbook rather than buying it. Got the contact details of venues and just rang up and says, we've got this touring band coming, how would you like to put them on, And that's like, you played in Drogheda, in the boxing club in Drogheda, and you played in Kilkenny and Henderson's. Like, it wasn't that there was this, well, the boxing club had gigs, but we just saw Kilkenny Henderson's in the Hot Press yearbook and rang them up. And they said yes, so. Yeah.
It's so brilliant. So in the next few gigs, the bands you brought over, you sort of built up a little touring circuit, didn't you?
Yeah, so we tried to get different places. So we tried to get people in different places that would put bands on. So Cork then became one. That's Emmett and Morty from Cork, and then there was up in Belfast. There was the Belfast gig collective, which we're starting around. Warzone was this art centre, like this, except run by whatever the punks up in Belfast. So places started coming up, and then as we did more and more gigs, other places like would randomly appear, like Arklow or Kill in Kildare, and you'd have maybe 6 months of gigs in those places. Or New Ross was another place, and Letterkenny we managed to get some bands to, and it would just be like people who lived there finding the local arts centre and going, yeah, come on down here, and we go, yeah, sure, yeah, we'd send a band if we, how many people do you think will be there? And they'd say, probably about 40 or 50, and then you do the calculations, 40 by 2, because it'd be £2 in, is 80 quid. You'd say to the band, well, you'll get 80 quid if you go to Arklow or whatever, and they'd go, oh, that's great, because that'll help pay for the ferry, because it was all just about trying to cover the ferry costs.
I mean, it's interesting to talk about this today, or I think it was yesterday, but, there's an article in The Guardian, I don't know if you saw it earlier this year, bands complaining about how hard it's to tour these days. It's not easy, it's never easy. And they'll talk about, you've got a crew of 6 and you need 6 hotel rooms, going, nah, that's not how it works. And I'm not like saying it's better for your soul to tour eco really hard at the bottom, but if no one really likes your band, there isn't a lot to play with, is there? So the tours you were putting on and the tours that we were playing and all these other bands were playing, it was just the band, and you would sleep on the floor and you eat loads of toast and go and play the next gig.
Yeah, I'm thinking of one of the places you stayed in Dublin wasn't great though. Was there a bank being stolen next door or something?
The squat, yeah. And about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the Irish Special Branch came around with machine guns and kicked the door in. They thought we were bank robbers trying to drill a hole through the wall to rob. We didn't even know what they were talking about because they didn't know there was a bank next door. So did you put us up there?
Yeah.
The guy,
they were just actors we sent to all the bands.
just to put us on edge. I mean, the guy's flat he was really nice and that.
Yeah. So he was the singer in the band that I was in at the time. Yeah, it wasn't a squat either. It just seemed that way. Yeah.
I remember it had no windows and it's really damp.
Yeah.
But still, it was still worth it. You would still do it to go and play the gig.
Well, yeah. And as awful as it was, and was probably bad, but when you were there and when you were doing it, I'm not sure if you felt that way, but we didn't realise it was bad. We thought, well, this is great. There's a band here, they can stay. We've got somewhere for them to stay.
We thought that's how you toured.
Yeah.
Well, we thought obviously these guys, they haven't got loads of money. They're going to put us in a hotel. You looked after us. It was great. That's how it was.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And the gigs are great as well. All the gigs really good. Some mad places, but some pretty cool gigs. So what bands did you move on to after that? How did you get from that up to Fugazi? Because Fugazi, of course, they're in the same world as us. They come out of that world, but they're a bigger operation, aren't they? Well, they're just bigger. More people actually like them. Yeah.
Well, I suppose they were a bigger operation in that more people went to see them, but they were the exact same operation as a band because they didn't come with 6 crew or anything like that. But so what happened was, I suppose, the Membranes came, then Anrevan came, and Anrevan told other friends, and you told other friends, and somebody who was booking No Means No in the UK wrote and said, would you put on No Means No? And we went, yeah, that sounds good. And somebody told me about this new band called Fugazi. It was my friend Alan, and Alan was exotic because he worked for Aer Lingus, so he could get flights to London. So he was able to see all these bands and tell us about bands because he'd get some records because he was able to fly to London. And he came back and says, oh yeah, I've got a tape of this band called Fugazi. They're ex-Minor Threat, ex-Rites of Spring. And we were going, Rites of Spring kind of sounds familiar. I think I heard them on some compilation cassette that somebody did. So I kind of tried to find out a bit more about Fugazi, and it turned out it was obviously they were on Discord Records. Discord was distributed in England by Southern Studios. So I had to go on this kind of hunt down of how would we ask Fugazi to come to Dublin, because we don't want to go over to the UK to see them because it would be too expensive for us all, for the four of us, to travel to the UK, and so whatever, rang up Southern Studios and eventually got through to some man called John. Well, at the time, you know, for me at that stage, some man called John Loader who ran Southern Studios, and said, "Oh yeah, you probably need to talk to Johnny Wetspots." I went, "Oh, that's a strange name, but yeah, sure. Have you got his phone number?" And then got his phone number. Now, even at that time, the only way to make the phone calls was to use someone else's phone, because like your one, you know, like my dad wouldn't let me make phone calls to the UK from my house, you know. So I had a job. Actually, I worked in the civil service, and I went into like my boss's office at lunchtimes to make the phone calls, because there was no phone, you know. It was the only way we could make these calls, and they eventually found out. But so rang up Johnny Jabs in England and said, you know, we'd like Fugazi to come to Dublin, and he said, "Oh, that sounds interesting. Where would you put them on?" I was like, "Oh, I don't know." McGonagall's just named the venue, because there'd been some gigs on at McGonagall's, and so he just said, "Okay, well, just let me contact the band," and then he told me to ring him back whatever time, and I rang him back then, and he says, "Yeah, they're interested. So, you know, can you tell me how much the venue will cost, and can you tell me, you know, how much all the expenses will be, and then how many people you think will be at the gig?" So it wasn't like we had to give a guarantee or anything. It was just like, yeah, well, the venue will be about 100. I think it was £180, which was quite a lot for what we were doing, and. So we just went, "Yeah, okay, I'll let the band know," and they seemed, they said that was good. They came over, and whatever we had, I don't know, the first Fugazi gig didn't have a huge amount of people, I think, but it cost us 20 quid. So between the four of us, we gave a fiver each to see Fugazi play. So that was good. But then when Fugazi played, then suddenly people started contacting. And I think other than you and Fugazi, I don't think we asked another band to play. It was all bands then contacting us.
So what kind of
contacting,
bands?
writing to me then.
So who was you putting on after that then?
The Vandals, from America as well. No Means No, a band called DOA, MDC, Green Day came, and Jawbreaker, and a lot. I wish I kind of had a very good memory for all these bands, and we do have a list of them. We have a website called hopecollectiveireland.com, and they're all listed on that. But there was 180 gigs.
Did he stay?
Yeah. So what we do is so a band, and it was all really through letters. A band would write a letter, or it then got to the stage that there was a fella called Nick Evans who worked for Alternative Tentacles. So he Victim's family were coming over, but him and Jabs would ring my mum's house. Yeah, so and but everyone else wrote letters, you know. So and then you'd go, "Yeah, okay, you want to play? We'll figure it out here. We can get you a lunchtime gig in Trinity College, or a lunchtime gig in whatever college in Bolton Street. You'll get, you know, whatever it was, £50-60 for that. That would be the day you arrive. So come over in the ferry on the, you know, Friday morning. You'll get your lunchtime gig. We'll find somewhere on Friday night, probably Dublin on Friday night, and then you'll play, you know, like maybe Belfast on Saturday. Work your way down, and you know, whatever way it was done, you'd have 4 gigs for the band, and calculate roughly how much you think they'd get, and just write back and say, "Yeah, well, that's what we can do." But there was never any guarantees. There was never any contracts. We wouldn't be able to really give the guarantees. We didn't, you know, have even the wherewithal or the thought process to guarantee a band. That never really came into the equation. But you'd have a rough idea how many people you think would go. But the second time Fugazi played, I don't know, they had a good few people at the gig. It was, I don't know, maybe 600 people. It was in McGonagall's again, and it was a strange one because we kind of hadn't anticipated so many people, because they about 200 the first time. We thought, yeah, they were a bit more, maybe 300 this time. So at the end of the night, I'd be a bit. The memory wouldn't be great with the actual figures, but say there was about 1,100 quid. I can't remember exactly, but about 1,100 quid. So McGonagall's got whatever they got. The sound engineer got whatever. So I went up to Ian from Fugazi and said, "Here's the 1,100 quid." And he's like, "Oh, no. You take whatever, 600 quid. We'll take 500 quid." And I'm like, I don't want any money. Like, I'm not, because money was like, there was no interest in. It was never ever about trying to make money from it, But he was like, no. He just insisted, try and make something happen. And I only found out afterwards that Fugazi were doing that in a lot of places on that tour, because suddenly the crowds were like had tripled or maybe even more. So we were then in a position, we had about 600 quid. I went, "Oh, this is amazing," to say to a band, "Yeah, you can come to Dublin, we can give you 150 quid. Because even if there wasn't enough people, we could dip into that pot."
Yeah.
And that's kind of how more, so smaller bands from the UK, like Herb Garden or the Keatons, smaller bands like that, you'd go, "Yeah, no," or Iconic Christ would come over and like, nobody knew who they were, but it didn't really matter because there was 150 quid that we were able to give them. And that lasted a good few years.
It's pretty amazing that Fugazi did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they basically propped up the whole DIY circuit for about 3 years, didn't they?
I think so, yeah. Well, judging from what other people are saying, in other places.
I've heard that stuff from a lot of promoters.
Yeah.
So you did 180 gigs, so why did you stop it? Did you just get too much? You just done it too long?
There's a few reasons. We had a daughter. Our daughter was born in 1999, and a couple of nights before she was born was the band called Happy Anger from France played, and so perspective and things changed then. But there was a couple of bands started coming in, and they started, asking questions of like, where's our rider, where do we go, where's our backstage area, and they could all be perfectly reasonable questions, but it wasn't a question that I wanted to answer. I was like, well, I don't have a rider, so why should you have a rider? Like, there was a group of us who organised the gigs. We were called the Hope Collective, but we paid into the gigs. So I was like, we're all this, it's all this kind of, maybe it's wishy-washy or whatever, but we were like, the people who come to the gigs are the same as the bands who play the gigs. So we're not going to treat you any different. We're going to respect you, and we're going to respect the people. We're going to respect everybody. And it just felt then that bands were thinking that we were promoters. And I have no interest in being a promoter.
You basically just wanted to see these bands, didn't you?
Yeah. And then to facilitate the bands coming over to my country. But if they wanted to do it if they wanted to go down a different road with someone else, absolutely no problem. Then great, they should. But the road that we were on was this road. And we were very happy with it, but it probably didn't. It might be more suited now, but this was probably the early 2000s, and bands were starting to go, well, it costs us money. Like, yeah, well, life costs you money, So we were probably better suited to maybe bands who are doing it for their hobby rather than bands that wanted to make a career out of it.
So the scene kind of changed.
So the scene, that scene certainly. That scene that was changing. Yes. Yeah.
So what was the last one you did?
So the last one that I did was Happy Anger, but Hope put on a few more gigs after that under the Hope Collective gig, and I think the last one might have been I think the band called Regulator Watts. They were from Washington DC. They played, I think, with Blue Tip, Discard band. But then, so we ended up three children, and then, but we put a book together just about it all. It's kind of what you're saying. It's called Document a Story. Well, it was. That was the book was called Document: A Story of Hope, and we were doing it and trying to think, what's the best way? You know, like it's kind of a strange one. You know, like why would you write a book about something that you've done yourself? You know, if it's important, then someone else should write it. You know, so we were like, okay, we just want to kind of put it down on the record that this happened, and maybe people might see it, and maybe people might go, oh, that's good. Well, maybe we could make it happen. But also, we asked all the bands who we got to play to give us a vegan recipe. So this was 2002, and I think one of the recipes is pot noodles. I think Frankie Stubbs did a baked potato, from Leatherface. But the thinking was, like we didn't just do this for the band. We were all part of something together. So we were asking the band to, put something into that book as well. Because it was all part.
It's a brilliant idea because it's the same story told in a different way.
Yeah. So for each gig there was a recipe from. We tried to get it from whatever band had played the gig. And most of them it is from the band. Certainly from somebody relating to a band that played on the night, and then the other page is the story of the gig and how it happened. So we're putting that book together, and that was whatever 2000. So I wasn't doing gigs, kids were born, but I was like putting the story of it, and I was like, well, what do you do now? Well, publish a book. It wasn't like, oh, I have this great idea, I'm going to give it to a publisher to try and publish. It was just like, all right, yeah, how do you publish a book? And just rang up. It was Jim Morris in Cork and said, how do we publish a book, Jim? And he just said, well, you need to do whatever you need to do and send it to me and I'll get it printed. So that's how that book came out.
Which is it's very much in the aesthetic of how this whole thing. Also, it's another example that punk rock to you is more than just records, wasn't it? I mean, it's the whole trip, wasn't it? It was the thing of being, not that you have to, but it's going vegan maybe. It's part, not totally punk, but those ideas suggested by punk that you could take up if you wanted, innit? Yeah. And also, you became a trade union organiser at work, so all this idealism is one of many different strands that kind of comes out of punk. Would that be fair to say?
I suppose, and it kind of sounds so corny, but probably every step I take comes from punk rock. Everything I do in my life, probably even the way I parent my kids, it all comes from listening to those damn Flux of Pink Indians records. My older brothers course crass at this stage because they're going, Jesus Christ. My brother, one of them, like he's vegetarian, he's going, I can't even eat meat because of my crass records. Because they're going, it's all right for Jimmy Pursey to say this, but I have to go to work every day, that kind of thing. It defined everything, like, and it comes back to that basic kind of thing, like that line of, if you've something to complain about, then you've something to change, and no matter what that is, in whatever walk of life, and you don't wait for other people to change it for you.
Yes, it's more about not just complaining, but the power of positive thinking, the positive side of punk.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and this brings you to where you are in your life now. I mean, you're not going to suddenly promote loads more DIY punk gigs, but you live in that kind of aesthetic, but in a different space now. It's like we're all getting older, but we're all still doing things that same kind of way, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah.
It's for a thing that was a teenage phenomenon. It's actually a lifelong trip, isn't it?
Yeah. So as hope, whatever the word, hope, like we've brought out 3 books or maybe 4, that are benefit books as well. So that kind of, it's not now about like organising gigs. It's now about asking those people who played those gigs or other people to write stories now for books to raise money for whatever cause. Mm-hmm. So I think there's one that's down there that.
Well, you brought some books tonight, didn't you, Niall? So which book?
So the one that's down, it's called Great Gig Memories, but it's I don't know, it's a benefit for the Irish Red Cross, and it's kind of a strange one because I don't really think, you know, charities are the answer to anything. But it was more just the idea that you'd get all these people to give up their time to write a story, and yeah, it's a benefit for the Irish Red Cross, who don't need the money, you know, because they're a very big organisation, but they do need, it was to do with their work around Ukrainian refugees. At the time it was Ukrainian refugees, so it's more, you know, that you're showing solidarity with the actions rather than trying to raise, you know, we raised, I think, €12,000, which is a good amount of money, but it's nothing to the Irish Red Cross. But there was 200 and odd people, including Roddy Doyle, including yourself, and there's a big list of names of very interesting people who have written stories about their favourite gig.
So that's the book that's on sale there.
Actually, the one that's on sale is called Punks Listen. So it's a similar kind of thing. It's people writing about their favourite records. They're very simple ideas, you know, but again, it's just to try and get people to give something back, you know, people who are in bands. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thanks a lot for that, Niall. So, Niall McGuirk. Yeah.